Major changes are coming for Title IX, the federal law that protects girls and women's rights in education. The Biden administration wants to change the way schools respond to sexual misconduct on campus and codify protections for LGBTQ students by changing the definition of sex.
This is where it gets sticky for women's sports, right?
Right. Absolutely. In fact, by adding the definition of sex to include sexual orientation and gender identity, they are necessarily opening up every sex-separate space that was anticipated to be needed under Title IX.
Sarah Parshall-Perry with the Heritage Foundation.
The regulations and congressional record make that very clear, that men and women, boys and girls, are different and need equal spaces, but require separation in some contexts. All of those spaces, whether it's athletics, locker rooms, bathrooms, single-sex admissions, or dormitories, would all be thrown open to individuals who identify as girls and women, regardless of what their biology is.
Conservative legal scholars like Perry and many feminists say that if men who identify as women can compete against women and share their spaces, it will erase women's sports and privacy.
Some say these changes mean the erasing of women. Do you agree with that?
I absolutely do. In fact, Title IX was passed specifically to guarantee the equality of women. It wasn't to guarantee the equality of men. Men already had full opportunity to compete in interscholastic athletics and to avail themselves of educational opportunities.
One prominent example, NCAA swimmer Leah Thomas, formerly Will Thomas, who became a national champion in the first season competing against women.
This is absolutely wrong. When it comes to women's sports, you cannot say, I support Title IX and women's access to sports and the ability to compete, and then at the same time say it's okay for transgender students who are, men, biological men competing on women's teams. Those cancel each other out, and they're in direct contradiction to one another.
A former Education Secretary, Betsy DeVos, reacting on CBN's Faith Nation.
We spent a lot of time regulating on this issue of how campuses, schools must handle issues of sexual misconduct under Title IX. And we put forward a rule that is fair, balanced, that recognizes the right to due process, that respects the complainant, the right of the victim to proceed with a case as they want it to proceed.
One of DeVos's legacies as Education Secretary was changing how schools handle sexual misconduct on campus.
And instead, it will return the college grievance procedure to a guilty until proven innocent standard, giving one Title IX investigator on a college campus all the power in the world to act as judge, jury, and executioner for someone's educational fate.
That, too, is on the chopping block with the Biden administration's changes. And these changes have to be open to public comment for at least 30 days, after which they can become legally binding. In Washington, D.C., Jenna Browder, CBN News.
Thanks, Jenna. Gordon, back to you.
Well, these are enormous changes, and you go back to the history of Title IX. It was put into place to make sure that women's athletics, women's programs would be fully funded. At that time, there was this huge rise in men's football. Men's basketball are packing out stadiums, and so universities, colleges were throwing a lot of money at men's sports, and it was trying to even the balance so that women could have equal access and equal funding and equal scholarships. All of that is now up in the air, and what does it mean to have transgender competition, and is it the end of women's sports? Just on a fairness, when you look at the biological things that happen when you're born male, what happens with your skeleton, what happens with your muscles, and you then decide in your teen years or young adult years that you really want to identify as female, so I'm going to now go participate in female sports. Well, you have an unfair advantage. And we've already seen that. It's already happened. So where's the fairness in here? And is truly women's sports on the way out as a result of these changes? But when you get the federal government involved and they start saying, well, we're going to cut off all the other federal funds you get unless you come into compliance, well, that's a culture change that I'm pretty sure most Americans aren't ready for.